Oh, hello. Yeah, I just thought it would be worthwhile having a quick look at the view from the other side of the hill, metaphorically speaking. Patrick Christie's, who's a man who does what he's told. So it'd be interesting to see particularly what the Millionaire view of the North Staffordshire by-election result is. So let's see what he has to say.
Well, Boris Johnson has been given a massive warning, hasn't he? Last night, news broke that the Liberal Democrats have snatched North Shropshire. The lady who came a distant third at the 2019 general election, Helen Morgan, overturned a 23,000 majority and won a seat that has been in Tory hands for almost 200 years. Here's a little clip, actually, of her acceptance speech.
Boris Johnson, the party is over. Your government, run on lies and bluster, will be held accountable. It will be scrutinised, it will be challenged, and it can and will be defeated.
Ironically, it doesn't look like she'd be too good at parties, does it? But anyway, I want to know if there was...
Yes, you'd want somebody who'd be good at parties, wouldn't you, Patrick? Let that one just sink in. You would want somebody, maybe Sean Bailey. He looks like he's good at parties, even though he doesn't attend them.
The by-election in your seat right now, would you vote Tory? And we're going to run a poll on that throughout the show as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they're actually going to tell us what the poll is. The poll will tell them that the people that watch GB News will vote Tory because they'll vote Tory no matter what.
I think the main issue for Boris Johnson, and indeed the Conservative Party, frankly, is that, well, it's not very conservative at the moment, is it? Boris stood on a ticket of low taxes, levelling up, tight borders, and here we are. We've been given a big green agenda that seemingly...
Right, just to cut in there. Yes, it isn't a very conservative party, but not for the reasons that Mr. Patrick is going to go into. Sorry, Mr. Patrick's bosses are going to go into. He's merely the mouth, isn't he? Yes, one of the basic problems with the Conservative Party for something like about the last 20 years is that it has morphed from what it used to be, to conserve, into a neo-libertarian party. And that's effectively what is running the agenda. If you look at all those backbenchers standing up, screaming blue murder in an epidemic about having to wear a face mask or present a bit of paper before they go to a pub, then you get the idea of where we are and what they consider to be important. They're quite happy to pass laws which mean that you can't protest at all, but magically it's a huge infringement on their rights to carry any documentation that say what their health status is. Let's move on.
Came out of nowhere. It's going to cost us all a shed load of cash and achieve diddly squat, really, when it comes to tackling global warming.
OK, yeah, the green agenda. This is something that big business love to go on about. I mean, this is the first thing he's come up with, you notice, the big number one issue. Except, of course, it isn't. I don't believe that the average Tory voter, bearing in mind how much they're having to pay now for their fuel, are going to particularly be jumping up and down about a green tax. Most of them, when they are, throughout time, polled, will say that they agree with the government switching to a low-carbon economy. So, number one on your list, Patrick, I really don't think so.
The Tories pledged not to raise tax, but they hiked them to help pay for health and social care, despite the fact that all of that money will probably be gobbled up by the NHS and not go to social care.
Right, OK. Yes, this government isn't a government of low taxation, but the Tories haven't been a government of low taxation for something like about 20 years ago. They are a government that are fully in favour of low taxation for certain groups of people, the top 1%. And the rest of us can pay for it. There's a very, very simple economic trade-off. You will notice, for example, Rishi Sunak in the last budget, who hiked taxes, but magically the banks paid less because, you know, they need a helping hand, don't they? Also, the planned cut to income tax isn't happening either. Our border in the Channel might as well not exist. Channel crossings have risen 8,700% in the last 3 years. Now, obviously, Boris hasn't been in charge for all of that, so it would be unfair to blame him
for all of it. But
Well, no, he hasn't been in charge, has he? But he heads up a government that's been in charge for 10 years, Patrick. And once again, we're likely to be foisted with a new Conservative leader in the new year that will play the old, gosh, wasn't the last administration bad? A party trick. But it's going to run very, very thin. I am not, again, entirely convinced that the average Tory voter really, and I mean really, cares particularly about migrants crossing the channel. They're told they should care by the media 24/7, and therefore it does tend to raise its head. However, in poll after poll, you will find it's not even in the top 3 of what people care about. My guess is that following a very, very disastrous period for the Conservative Party for about the last, 6 months now, that they will play the race card. I'm fully expecting a massive media onslaught vis-à-vis brown people. Let's see.
But in the last year, we've seen around 27,000 arrivals. This time last year, that figure was about 8,400. We haven't deported a single one of them yet, as far as I'm aware. I think more of that Tory sleaze allegation, or Christmas parties, for example, they may have had a bit of an impact, but I really think it'll be the images of Border Force officers.
Right. Yeah, the parties may have had an impact. Patrick, that was the issue. When a government is seen as having a number of problems and it basically turns round and says to people collectively, especially the middle classes, all those Daily Telegraph readers, it basically says, F you, we don't really care, we're going to lump you in with the working classes in terms of people being treated with our utter disdain by us. At that point, Patrick, it really does cut through. The whole thing about the parties is one rule for them, the 1%, another one for the rest of us. I think Marx had something to say about the notion of the middle classes being sublimated into the working classes. I think people are feeling it.
Spending thousands and thousands of pounds on Domino's pizza for illegal immigrants that really turn Tory voters off. North Shropshire voted for Brexit. It's a Brexit-backing seat, and it's just elected a Liberal Democrat, someone from a party that wanted to overturn the result of a democratic referendum and take us back into the EU. That's a big statement. I doubt that.
Yeah, it's a huge statement, and perhaps it is as well that for a rural constituency, which relies heavily on farming, that an awful lot of those people have realised that Brexit basically has skewered their business. It could just be, couldn't it, Patrick? That not that, I think people are still very keen on Brexit. But Brexit hasn't realistically happened, has it? We've got all of the negatives we were told about, and where are the positives? Well, if you're a cattle farmer, you will likely see your business go to Australia. Yeah, things like that are actually really, really important. This government has decided, once again, like I've said, that they don't care about people at that strata of society.
Very much that the people of North Shropshire were signalling their intentions to rejoin the European Union at this by-election, but they were definitely signalling that they absolutely didn't want Boris Johnson. Boris was supposedly this big libertarian, but we just introduced vaccine passports, haven't we? And we've
OK, no. Sorry, Patrick, but no. Boris Johnson has never been a libertarian. Throughout his entire political career, he's been a Boris Johnsonite. All right, as Lord Mayor of London, you can see probably what his true politics are. It's basically whatever's likely to work. He's not a libertarian. There are a lot of libertarians in the cabinet, and there is a huge proportion, probably about a third of Conservative MPs who are incredibly libertarian, and they're the ones jumping up and down about passports, etc. Boris Johnson isn't a libertarian.
We've had some of the most draconian restrictions imposed on our lives in history. But I want to make a point on that, actually.
Right, hang on a second. Draconian restrictions. Yes, I wonder what Patrick would have thought of the Second World War. Never mind, draconian restrictions. Jesus. Yeah? Having to wear a bit of cloth for 5 minutes in a shop. Oh, the horror.
Are we being a bit unfair on Boris here? He nearly died. His mum passed away. He became a father twice. Carrie had a miscarriage. The pandemic has been absolutely mental, and no leader anywhere in the world got it right. In fact, no matter what he does, he'll always be criticised.
Right, yes, Patrick, because he's the leader, that's the job. He wanted it. He wanted the job. I don't care. I don't care what his personal circumstances are. He is, as everybody knew he would be, including most of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, they knew full well what they were buying into, and they got it. It just so happened that Brexit and COVID came along at the same time and have utterly skewered him. Perhaps in more milder waters, he might just have been able to just kind of bob along with the Daily Mail and people like you saying, oh, I think he's doing okay, and imagine if it was Jeremy Corbyn. But it won't suffice anymore. He's been shown as the utterly shambolic charlatan that he is, which is why they're going to get rid of him.
I actually think that Keir Starmer is getting off very lightly here. Labour came third with just 9.6% of the vote. That is a terrible result.
Right, OK. No, it isn't, Patrick, is it? Because there are an awful lot of people tactically voting. Now, I am as far removed as from a Keir Starmer fan as anyone in this country. But, mate, you can't use the North Shropshire election result as saying, oh, the Labour Party, oh, good grief. No, I'm sorry, you really can't. From day one, the Lib Dems presented themselves as the alternative, and backed by papers like, The Guardian, that has continued. If Labour had been sensible, what they would have done, they're not going to be sensible under Keir Starmer, but anyway, if they had been sensible, what they would have done would be simply say, OK, we'll stand aside and put up a unity candidate, maybe a hint at, what they should do at the next election. But the Parliamentary Labour Party won't do that. Keir Starmer won't do that. They're not interested. It's not what the Labour Party does anymore.
Keir Starmer has been Labour leader for a little while now, hasn't he? And he's not had any cut-through whatsoever. He's been presented with government chaos, mass public dissatisfaction, corruption claims, romantic scandals, Tory infighting. And Starmer hasn't managed to do a single thing with any of it. Nothing. He's just an empty vessel in a smart suit, isn't he?
Well, yes, Patrick, he is. However, that doesn't mean that magically the Conservatives are going to be able to come back from this. I really don't think that they can. I really don't think they can come back from this. They will put up a new candidate, but if you look at the likely successors, and it won't be someone with brown skin because the Tories won't vote for someone with brown skin, you are left with a incredibly small number of people who might be leader.
If people are calling Boris Johnson's leadership into question over this North Shropshire result, and they are, then Keir Starmer should be considering his position as well, shouldn't he? My visceral disdain for...
Well, yes, I would agree with you on that one, but no, in a political sense, he won't. All Labour have to do at the moment, as you may have noticed, is absolutely nothing, and they are above the Conservatives in the polls at the moment. That will change because the Labour Party find it impossible to cut through to actual Conservative voters, which is why perhaps they need a completely new election strategy. One they're not going to do.
Tony Blair knows absolutely no bounds. But if he was in charge of the Labour Party right now, I think it's fair to say that they'd have won that seat.
No, they wouldn't have done. Because people like that will not hold their noses and vote Labour under any circumstances. It just isn't going to happen.
I also think the Tory candidate was very poor. Neil Shastri-Hurst was asked in the run-up to the election 4 times if he thought Boris Johnson was a man of honesty, and he couldn't answer the question.
Right, yes, he was a very poor candidate. The primary one, once again, was that he was parachuted in from Birmingham into a constituency that he had no knowledge of, again showing the leadership's utter disdain for the people that vote for them. That's where your cut-through is, Patrick.
It's not a resounding endorsement, is it? Look, the message is loud and clear for Boris Johnson. If he wants his Conservative Party to win elections, they actually have to be a Conservative Party.
Yes, they do, Patrick, but not in the sense that you mean. Because turning it into a neo-libertarian party with all of those little Patrick Swayze or whatever the guy's name is, all of those little pro-Brexit groupings being in charge won't achieve electoral success next time, I'm afraid. And unfortunately for the Conservative Party, the only realistic people who are going to stand are from that wing of the party. And that's not going to bode well, because instead of an incompetent Boris, middle of the roader, you're going to get an incompetent, well, effectively proto-fascist who's going to be running the country. And if you want to see electoral meltdown for the Conservative Party at that point, mate, you will do.